The moors stretched in every direction like a gray-green sea frozen mid-wave, and Chillingham Manor rose from them like something drowning. Alara Moss pulled her surveying equipment from the trunk and studied the building she'd been hired to assess. 3 stories of Georgian stone gone black with age and weather, windows like empty eye sockets, the whole structure listing slightly to the east as if the earth beneath it had grown tired of holding it up. Ivy covered the western wall so completely that the stone had vanished beneath a skin of dying vegetation. Beautiful, isn't it? Alara turned to find the developer approaching from a sleek black car she hadn't heard arrive. Malcolm Sage was exactly what she'd expected from their phone conversations. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive smile that never quite reached his eyes. Mid-40s, graying at the temples, carrying himself with the confidence of old money. It's certainly atmospheric, Alara said, shaking his offered hand. His grip was cold despite the leather gloves. You really think this place can be converted into a hotel? Dark tourism is quite profitable these days. Sage gestured at the manor with proprietary pride. People pay extraordinary amounts to sleep in haunted locations. Chillingham has a particularly rich history. Torture, murder, Spanish witches, the full Gothic package. Your survey will help us determine which sections are salvageable and which need reconstruction. And the local planning commission is on board with this? The land has been in my family for generations. What I do with it is my concern. His smile widened slightly. You'll find everything you need inside. The electricity is functional in most areas. I've left comprehensive floor plans in the main hall. Take all the time you need, though I'd prefer the initial assessment completed within the week. That's ambitious for a building this size. I'm confident in your abilities, Ms. Moss. Your reputation is impeccable. Sage checked his watch. I'm afraid I have another appointment. Do you have any questions before I leave? The key? Ah, yes. He reached into his jacket, then paused, patting his pockets with theatrical confusion. How odd. I was certain I'd brought it. Well, no matter, the house is unlocked. The front door tends to stick, but a firm push should manage it. I'll courier the key to you tomorrow. He was in his car and gone before Alara could respond, the black vehicle disappearing down the long drive like a drop of ink absorbed into gray paper. She turned back to the manor and saw something glinting near the iron gate. A small silver key, ornate and old, partially hidden in the dead grass. Alara picked it up, turning it over in her hand. The metal was surprisingly warm, and the key itself was beautiful, too decorative to be functional, with a handle shaped like a coiled serpent. He must have dropped it, she thought, pocketing it. I'll return it when he comes back tomorrow. The front door opened before she could touch it. Just a few inches, enough to suggest a draft or settling foundation. But Alara felt the temperature drop 10 degrees as she stepped across the threshold, and somewhere deep in the house, she heard a sound like a long, satisfied breath. The interior of Chillingham Manor smelled of rot and time. Alara's footsteps echoed through the entrance hall, where a grand staircase curved upward into shadows. The floor plans Sage had promised were spread across a dust-covered table, held down by stones that looked like they'd been there for decades. She spent the first 2 hours documenting the obvious damage: water stains spreading across ceilings like continents, floors that sagged when she tested their weight, walls where the plaster had cracked into geometric patterns that reminded her uncomfortably of veins. The house was structurally unsound in a dozen critical ways. Converting it into a hotel would require essentially rebuilding it from the foundation up, which made her wonder why Sage had hired her at all. By late afternoon, hunger drove her toward what the floor plans identified as the kitchen. The room was vast and cold, with a stone floor and an enormous fireplace that must have been used for cooking in centuries past. Modern appliances had been installed at some point: a refrigerator from the 1970s, a stove with gas burners crusted with rust, but they'd been disconnected long ago. Alara's throat was dry from breathing dust all day. She turned on the tap at the old porcelain sink, expecting nothing, and was surprised when water coughed out in brown spurts before running clear. She cupped her hands under the stream, but before she could drink, she felt it, a presence behind her, watching. She turned. The woman stood by the pantry door, wearing rags that might have once been a servant's uniform. Her skin was gray, and her lips were black, not painted, but stained, as if she'd been drinking ink. She was frantically turning the tap on and off, her movements jerky and desperate. The water ran through her transparent hands. "Don't let them close the walls," the woman whispered, her voice like wind through a crack. She looked directly at Alara with eyes that were nothing but whites. "Don't let them close the walls. The boy is still there. They're always still there." Alara backed away, her heart hammering. The woman flickered like a candle flame and vanished. For a long moment, Alara stood in the empty kitchen, trying to rationalize what she'd seen. Exhaustion. Dehydration. The stress of her recent breakup making her see things that weren't there. But her hands were shaking as she gathered her equipment, and when she tried to leave the manor, she found the front door wouldn't open. She pushed through her weight against it. The door remained sealed as if it had been locked from the outside, though there was no lock, no bolt, nothing preventing it from opening except its own absolute refusal to move. Alara tried the windows. Painted shut or simply stuck, every single one. She pulled out her phone. No signal. She ran to her car in the drive, fumbling for her keys, but the engine turned over once and died. Wouldn't start again no matter how many times she tried. The sun was setting, turning the moors the color of a bruise, and Alara understood with cold certainty that she wasn't leaving tonight. Possibly not ever. She made camp in the main hall, using her emergency kit from the car to set up a battery-powered lamp and lay out a sleeping bag. But sleep was impossible. The house was too loud, creaking and settling, yes, but also breathing. She could hear it in the walls, a slow respiratory rhythm that shouldn't exist in an empty building. Alara tried to rationalize it. Old houses made noise. Pipes expanding and contracting. Wind in the chimneys. Wood settling after decades of temperature changes. But this was different. This had a pattern or rhythm. Inhale for 7 seconds. Hold for 3. Exhale for 7 more. Over and over, like the house had lungs buried somewhere in its foundation. She pulled out her laptop, thinking she'd document her observations, maybe email someone about the situation. But there was no internet connection, and her phone remained dead despite being fully charged that morning. The battery icon showed full bars, but the screen wouldn't respond to her touch. It was as if the house was dampening any connection to the outside world. At 2 a.m., she heard footsteps on the floor above. Slow, deliberate, pacing the length of the master bedroom. Back and forth, back and forth. Alara gripped her lamp and considered investigating, but something primal in her brain screamed not to. Stay down here. Stay in the light. Don't go looking for what's making that sound. The footsteps stopped. And somewhere above her, something began to scratch. The sound came from the master bedroom, according to the floor plans. Elara climbed the stairs with her lamp, following the scratching to a room dominated by a four-poster bed draped in rotted velvet. The scratching was definitely coming from inside the wall. She'd brought her equipment up out of professional habit. Found a stud finder, a small sledgehammer, safety goggles. The wall was plaster over lath, already cracked. Wouldn't take much to make a small inspection hole. Elara swung the hammer. The plaster crumbled, and a blue light spilled out. Not reflected light. Not any kind of light that should exist. It was cold and pale and moved like water, flowing from the hole she'd made like the wall was bleeding luminescence. The temperature in the room dropped so fast that Elara's breath misted in front of her face. She could feel the cold radiating from the opening, not the temperature of winter but something deeper, the cold of things that had been buried too long. Elara enlarged the opening, her hands working automatically while her mind screamed at her to stop, to leave, to run from whatever was making that impossible light. The plaster fell away in chunks, and she saw the cavity behind it. Saw what had been sealed inside. The bones were small. A child's skeleton, folded into the wall cavity in a position that suggested it had been alive when placed there, curled into a fetal position, hands raised as if trying to claw through the plaster. The blue light emanated from the bones themselves, seeping from the marrow. But that wasn't what made Elara drop her hammer. The skeleton was clutching a toy. Not rotted fabric, not an antique doll, but a small plastic action figure, bright red and blue, articulated joints, mass-produced. She recognized it. Her nephew had the same one. It was from a movie franchise that had only launched 15 years ago. This child hadn't been walled up in the 1800s. This had happened in the last 2 decades. In the modern era. In a time when people had cell phones and internet and police investigations. And no one had found him. No one had stopped it. The blue boy wasn't history. It was happening. Every century, every generation, the house took a child and sealed it in the walls, and the pattern would continue because the house had learned how to hide in plain sight, how to exist in the gaps of human attention. Elara stumbled backward, and the blue light followed her. It coalesced in the center of the room, forming the shape of a boy maybe 8 years old. His eyes were gone, replaced by those same cold lights. He pointed at Elara, then at the floor, then vanished. She looked down at the floorboards where he'd pointed and saw words carved into the wood, old and deep. The torturer comes back. Over the following hours, the house revealed itself in layers. Elara found the letters in the library, dozens of them, addressed to her in spidery handwriting on yellowed paper. They were signed by Lady M and dated from 1789. Each one was a warning, increasingly desperate. "My husband has left me here. The torturer says abandonment is a kind of death. He feeds on it. I feel myself fading. You are like me. I can feel your heartbreak. The house knows. It always knows when someone arrives carrying loss. He is coming. When the temperature drops, when you can see your breath, that is when John Sage walks again. Run if you can." I could not. Elara's recent breakup felt like an open wound. 3 years with Marcus, ended by a text message while she was on a job site. I need space. This isn't working. She'd been managing the pain by not thinking about it, by throwing herself into work. but the house wouldn't let her forget. Every time she thought of Marcus, the temperature plummeted. She could see her breath misting in the library, could hear the rustle of silk in the corridors, Lady Mary's dress, walking the halls where she'd been abandoned centuries ago. The house was feeding on her grief the same way it had fed on Lady Mary's. And that's when she heard footsteps in the basement. The basement stairs descended into absolute darkness that her lamp couldn't penetrate. But Alara was past the point of rational choice. The house had shown her its secrets, the poisoned servant, the walled-up children, the abandoned wife. Now it was showing her the architect of all that suffering. John Sage waited at the bottom of the stairs. He was tall and thin, dressed in clothes from the 18th century, and his face was a mask of polite cruelty. When he smiled, his teeth were too white, too sharp, too many. "Mess. Moss," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "How wonderful that you could join us. Malcolm said you'd be perfect. A woman recently abandoned, carrying so much delicious pain. The house has enjoyed your suffering. And so have I. Malcolm, he's your descendant, yes. The Sage family has always understood the importance of legacy, of feeding the foundation." He gestured behind him, and Alara saw it. The oubliette. Not a pit. Not a hole. A mouth. It was organic, actually, literally organic. The stone floor of the basement gave way to something that looked like flesh, pink and glistening and wrong. The opening was ringed with what could have been teeth, or perhaps ribs, arranged in a circle that descended into pulsing darkness. The walls around it weren't stone anymore, but something that moved slightly, breathing, alive. The entire basement was a throat, and the oubliette was the stomach it fed. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Sage moved closer, and Alara saw that he wasn't fully solid. She could see through him to the wall beyond. "I built this house around it." Or perhaps it built the house around itself. After 4 centuries, I can't quite remember which came first. But I know this, it must be fed. Pain, suffering, death, the pit hungers, and I provide. Malcolm lures them here. Developers, surveyors, ghost hunters. People no one will miss. And the house grows stronger. "The Spanish witch was my first meal," Sage said, and his smile widened impossibly. "Elena. Such a lovely name for such a troublesome woman. She cursed this place, cursed anyone who takes from it. But I found a way to turn her curse into my trap. Anyone who steals the key becomes bound here. You picked it up, didn't you? Thinking you were helping?" Alara's hand went to her pocket. The silver key was burning hot now, searing through the fabric. "The curse binds you to the house until you die," Sage continued. "And when you do, you'll join the others. The servant in the pantry, the boy in the walls, Lady Mary in the library. Ghosts forever feeding the pit with their eternal suffering. And I." He spread his arms wide. "I manage it all. The torturer, the architect, the eternal proprietor of Chillingham Manor." He reached for her, his fingers lengthening into something that looked like roots or veins, and Alara knew that if he touched her, she'd be pulled into the oubliette while still alive, would feel it digesting her for however long consciousness lasted in that organic darkness. But she remembered something. The curse applied to anyone who took from the house. Anyone. Alara pulled the silver key from her pocket. It was searingly hot, the serpent handle writhing under her fingers, and lunged forward. She slipped it into Sage's coat pocket before he could react, her hand passing through his semi-solid form like plunging into ice water. "A gift," she gasped. "I return what was stolen. The key belongs to the house. Now it's yours." Sage's eyes widened. He reached for the key, but it was already sinking into him, burning into his spectral flesh. He opened his mouth to scream, and something else screamed with him, the house itself, recognizing the transfer of the curse. The temperature dropped to far below zero. Frost spread across the walls in fractal patterns, and the oubliette began to reverse its hunger. Instead of pulling down, it started pulling inward, drawing Sage toward it like a mouth sucking in breath. He clawed at the air, at the floor, but the curse had him now, the full weight of Elena's wrath, undiluted by 4 centuries of misdirection. "No," he managed. "No, I built this place. I own." The other ghosts appeared. The white pantry ghost with her blackened lips. The blue boy with his empty, light-filled eyes. Lady Mary in her rustling silk, her face finally visible, beautiful and terrible and furious. Others too, dozens of them, all the victims Sage had fed to the pit over 400 years. They grabbed him, pulled him down, and the oubliette opened wide, its organic walls contracting, its teeth-like structures grinding together as it consumed not a victim but its own creator, the one who'd sustained it for centuries. Sage's scream echoed through the basement as he disappeared into the pit, and then the screaming stopped, and there was only silence. The basement collapsed. Not violently, more like a long, slow exhalation. The organic walls deflated, the mouth pit closed, and the floor became just stone again, solid and dead and normal. The house shuddered, and Alara ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time as the entire structure began to fail around her. She emerged into the entrance hall to find a woman waiting. Elena. The Spanish witch was small and dark-haired, wearing simple clothes from the 16th century. Her eyes were kind despite everything she'd endured. She looked at Alara and smiled sadly. "You broke his hold," Elena said. Her voice was warm, nothing like the cold whispers of the other ghosts. "After 400 years, someone finally understood. The curse was never meant for the innocent. It was meant for him. But he was clever. Always too clever." "What happens now?" Alara asked. The house was groaning, walls cracking, but Elena remained solid and calm. "I can rest. We all can. But the house." Elena gestured around them. The house was built on top of the pit. Destroying Sage weakened it, but the pit itself is old. Older than him. Older than me. It sleeps now, but it will wake again. Perhaps in a century. Perhaps less. Then I have to destroy it completely. You could try. Elena moved closer. Or you could become its guardian. Stay here, ensure no one else falls into the trap until the manor finally dies on its own. Decades of solitude, but you'd save lives. Alara thought about it. About spending the rest of her life in this crumbling house on the empty moors, watching over a sleeping mouth in the earth. It was a kind of nobility, a kind of purpose. "No," she said finally. "I've been trapped enough. By this house, by my own grief. I'm done with prisons." Elena's smile grew. "Then burn it. Burn it all. The pit can't survive fire." Alara used everything flammable she could find, old furniture, the rotted velvet drapes, the wooden floorboards pried up with her surveyor's tools. She poured gasoline from her car's reserve tank. She lit it with a road flare from her emergency kit and walked away while Chillingham Manor burned behind her. The front door opened for her this time. The gate swung wide. Her car started on the first try. She drove through the moors without looking back, and when she finally glanced in her rearview mirror, she saw Elena standing in the flames, smiling and waving, finally free. The house burned for 3 days. Malcolm Sage was never seen again. His office claimed he'd gone abroad indefinitely. The insurance investigation concluded it was an electrical fire in a derelict property, and the land was left to rewild. Elara went home. She slept. She healed. She moved on from Marcus and the job and the memory of organic walls breathing in a basement that shouldn't exist. 5 years later, she read a news article. A developer had purchased the Chillingham Moor property. They were planning to build luxury homes on the site. Historical surveys had found interesting medieval foundations that they intended to preserve as a selling point. Elara felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd burned the house, but the pit was older than the house. Old as the moors themselves. And some ground, she understood now, was just hungry. It would wait. Patient and sleeping and inevitable. And someday, someone would dig too deep and wake it again. Some inheritances, she realized, couldn't be burned away. They could only be passed down.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.